All right, Erik Birkfeld, thank you for coming
It's
to
my pleasure. Well, thanks for
Growing
having me.
Pains. And
Grow as well.
we've been through a lot of growth each other. So it'd be very interesting to have your conversation. Erik, why don't you start off by telling me a bit about your background as a IT leader and where you're at today, just to give the audience a sense of who you are.
I thank you, and we are. My career and my experience has gotten me here, and I'm still growing, and it's still painful. I came up through the ranks in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, as a software engineer, and moved to San Diego. Luckily, I was able to from New York City in 2000 rather. And right around that time, I realized that the engineering part of the house and really the assets that are in that, the human capital became a commodity. And that it was a very much, hey, do this, or I'm going to find somebody that can do it. And it was a very much a mushroom culture, right? Like, keep everybody in the dark, feed them crap, and hope they grow. And at that time, I realized there was no real voice for the engineer. It was really, the direction was derived from product sales and marketing and executive, and our engineering leadership was really break fix and extremely reactive. And so around the early 2000s, I started to migrate over to straddle the engineering and the product side of the house and the sales side of the house so that I could create more of a direction, a light, so to say, for the engineer, so that they had the direction, they understood the why. And 20 some odd years later, I've made a career out of it, and my goal is to help organizations uh, make sure that their engineering department is a cultural fit, is a health fit, is a technology fit is that tide that lifts the business direction and requirements.
And that's really cool because sometimes you start with your engineering team to build say a SaaS company, and then it drifts away from marketing and sales, and then companies fall apart. Uh,
Yeah.
and so when you were doing this transition, was that from larger, enterprise level organizations into more SaaS businesses, and that got your appetite wet for product, or how did that
Yes.
transition
So I
happen?
did a lot of BI when in the early '90s. I mean in the late '90s, and then in the early 2000s, really when we had that kind of SaaS emergence. I actually worked for a company that did all the demonstrations for like Sam's Club, HEB, and Costco. So when you go into Costco and you get those free demos of food, there's a whole software platform behind that. And I worked for the company that did that. In fact, I was like instrumental in building the first iteration of that so that the Costco was able to take this international into Korea, Japan, and elsewhere. We had a lot of developers, India, Connecticut, San Diego, very distributed, and there was a lot of waste. There was a lot of miscommunication. There was a lot of, engineers at heart are engineers. They want to tinker. They want to figure out edge cases. Left to their own device, they're going to go do that. They're going to go pull the thread and see where it goes. And
Right.
so that can become catastrophic for both sides, right? Either they go off the reservation and then lose their place, or if they're left too far to their own device, then they miss the target, and then it becomes a blame culture. Whether that target was missed because you didn't have somebody giving them a good tangible target to shoot for, or there was just guesswork, whatever the case is, at the end of the day, it becomes, you know, there's a lot of attrition, there's a lot of bad practice, technical debt, operational debt, and then career debt. And then all of a sudden you find yourself 5 years in and you're like, what do I have to show for it? And that becomes
Right.
an albatross.
Right. Now so let's unpack a bit of that because that's pretty interesting where you went with the following the thread and then going offline. What I mean, it seems like an organ when you have customers like Costco, with in-store sales and promotional stuff, that would drive a pretty direct product direction towards what they're looking for, as opposed to, I can't see how you could go off that thread. Is that what happened there, or is that something
No,
else?
no, I'm just saying that happens,
Okay,
and we were very successful, and it was a windfall for the company that I was working for.
right.
And then once I got out of that, I did get more into small to medium-sized startups. I just done printing, and I've been in, I've really
Printing.
run, yeah, I'm printing middleware and a
Okay.
SaaS company around printing middleware,
Yeah,
all the way through, multiple different verticals in SaaS. What I mean is that there's a lot of why isn't this done? Why isn't this ready?
right,
Or there's a lot of, hey, you delivered this, but it only checks off these three boxes and not these five. Or even worse is, I asked for all of this. You gave me all of this, but all I needed was this. Right, and
okay,
this was kind of at the genesis of the MVP culture, right? When we
right,
started having that in our jargon, and we really started to look at like, what, oh, you need to get across the street. Well, I'm going to give you a Cadillac. Well, I don't need a Cadillac to get off the street, across the street. I really just need a skateboard. Oh, you needed a skateboard. I could have did that in a week.
right, right,
That kind of stuff. So I saw a lot of that, and really all it needed was a technical leader that understood both sides, that could distill down the business requirements and acceptance criteria to a point with direction and leadership that you could course correct that engineering mind that's like, I know I just need a skateboard, but wouldn't it be cool to build a Cadillac? You're like,
right,
build a Cadillac later when we get the revenue.
right, right. Okay. And so you've been doing this practice for a while, and you've been through enough cycles. What is it? What would you say? Let's take it in segments. Let's say you've got some traction. You may be getting close to product market fit, which is defined very differently among different organizations. But let's just say you've got your past your 10 customers, so you kind of know that you got some traction and you're moving. You get a little bit of dough. So I'd say your series seed funded and trying to get towards a series A. What do you see as the biggest mistakes that companies make, either as an engineering lead or as the company itself, and the mix between the two in those stages?
Great question, and I think it's way more prevalent than we'd like to believe. And I think a lot of what it comes down to is what got you here isn't going to get you there.
Okay.
Uh, right. And when we are working fast and furious, we will cut corners. Not that that's bad, but we will incur cruft in our systems. We will incur some technical debt, operational debt.
Yeah.
Feel like we I feel like that it's hard for us sometimes to stop and identify that and deal with it because we're so on to the next target. And
Right.
so you start to build on top of shaky ground.
Right.
And that is one of the big things that I see. And then all of a sudden, fast forward, you're in V2, V3, V4, you're going through due diligence, maybe you're an aqua cell or you're gonna acquire somebody. And now you're gonna bring all this in, and now you're putting it again on loose foundation. And so
Right.
I don't I have seen where it's like, well, I don't want to lift that curtain back because I don't want to show you my past mistakes.
Yeah.
Um, and I also see that we want to sometimes throw good money after bad, after bad money.
When
And
you say good, throwing good money after bad, what do you
like,
mean?
I want to build to bring in new revenue, new customers. But I've spent some bad money in the past doing some things and I haven't rectified that yet.
Right. Right. Right.
And and the team will kind of boil. The team always knows where the bodies are buried.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Right, and sometimes you need somebody really to step in and say, hey, I get you. We're gonna push pause. And that's a cultural shift. That's sometimes tectonically culturally shifting, right? To say, we need to stop. I know we've got this new customer or this new market that we want to penetrate, but we need a couple months just to shore everything up.
Right. And so do you think that when you say what got you there isn't going to get you where you need to go, a lot of people in venture world talk about that as being a transition in leadership, that, hey, now we're going to bring in our talent people and we're going to get you the right CTO or whatever. what do you see about, I mean, then, but the CTO's got life and blood into this baby, and you don't want to get rid of that, right? So where do you, how do you position yourself as an opinion on that idea, or strict, forget about opinion, what would you do tactically to transition? Because that's mindset as well as anything else. Like like you said, it's culture, right? Is the culture of the CTO, hey, I'm a firefighter and I love firing fighters, and we got so much technical debt, I'm the hero in the world every time I fix it? Or is it, I need a CTO who's really more strategic and can figure out how to scale?
It's a little bit of all.
Yeah.
I wish I had this stat, and so I'll broad stroke the stat. But Kathy Keating, with 7 CTOs, did a study, and I want to say it was something like the CTO is the most, like the most brittle point in a software organization. Like CTOs get removed more than any other person in the engineering organization.
Okay, removed, they don't quit and then go to the next.
They either quit forced out, or the board steps in, the company gets to growth and you're not the right person.
Okay, gotcha.
What sucks about that is that CTOs don't always have a mentor. A
Right.
CTO has an extremely weird ecosystem for them to kind of grow up and blossom in, right? They start as an engineer, they come to it, they become a team lead, they become an engineering manager, VP of Eng, a CTO. But who's helping them? Who's teaching them, right? I'm part of the 7 CTOs organization. I've been there for over 10 years now. And we've got people like the CEO Etienne de Bruin, who has built an organization where we're a community of practice. And now we have other CTOs that, are way above us. And it's like, hey, my company's going Series C. What do I need to get to the next level? And now you've got mentors. But there's a
Mm,
lot of CTOs out there that don't have that. So when you get to this point of growth where you're like, hey, one of the anecdotes I always give to my engineering managers, or I like to help senior engineers get to an engineering manager position. And
okay.
the anecdote I always tell them is the company comes in, hey, we just got a 12 mil round of funding. We're going to hire 40 developers. Sean, you're an amazing software engineer. I want you to manage them. And you're
Right.
just like, I don't know how to do that.
Right. Right.
That happens with CTOs, right? They'll
Right.
I've got a team of 10. Now we acquired another company. I've got a team of 40. I don't have the
Right.
skill set. And so that mindset coupled with that skill set sometimes just doesn't work. And so a company will come in and say, okay, let's go get the right person. And that's not a bad thing,
Hmm.
right? Because you need to, what got you here isn't going to get you there. And a lot of times it
Right.
is the people. It's also sometimes the teams, right? We used to, back in the day, it was very common that I just threw the earphones on and drank a bunch of Red Bulls and I just went
Yeah.
off and did my thing. We don't do that now. It is a team sport now.
Right. Right.
And so I think that, being able to foster a culture like that, not just in engineering and engineering leadership, but also from CEO, CPO, board to say, hey, I appreciate that you are a firefighter, but we can't have fires all the time.
Right.
I need more new technology value in this company. I need less keeping the lights on. Keeping the
Right.
lights on us is break fix, drag on the engineering, hot fixes, bad stuff going out. We
Right.
got to get away from that because our customer feels that.
Yeah. 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 I've seen it about 7 times now where we come in because the venture company is saying, look, we need these guys bootstrap to get these great customers, and now we need to scale the back end so that it can fit a much bigger global market. But we need the engineers to keep working on the and servicing our customer base. So can you get these guys a new system in the back end, and then we'll flip them back in and take over and ride from there. And that happens time and time again. But what happens as well is you do get that engineer who led them to those companies and got them those deals, that the company owes that engineer tons of credit for getting them there. And that engineer is not the right one to bring it to the next level.
Thank you
Um,
for your service,
yeah. Yeah.
right?
Or hey, you're a great lead engineer for, underneath this higher level person. That
Yeah.
makes more sense.
It's not just always cut bait and run. So I always look at I try to treat every relationship that I have, I want everybody to walk away like Erik's a great person and I learned a lot and that he was open to learn as well.
Mm,
And for people that work in my companies and on my teams, I always tell them like 10 years from now, I want you to look back and say that was one of the best stops in my career.
right.
And you can't always have longevity. And so sometimes you have to, the HubSpot jargon is you've got to graduate somebody out.
Right.
But you can do that in a way that's like, Sean, you're awesome, and we will do everything we can do to help you find the right fit. It's not the right fit now with us. You've gotten us here. Thank you so much. And jettison you into with that knowledge that you did something. It doesn't always have to be like, we're letting you go, Sean.
Gotten loose. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You're not the
Yeah.
right guy or the right woman. So let me ask you about that. How have you seen companies do a really good job at executing on mentoring that team to rise to the level in advance or during that transition of high growth and
A-
scalability?
Absolutely.
Okay.
One of my um, still to this day, best friends and great mentors, Steve Bjorgen. He was the CTO at Mind Touch, and I worked under him to manage the engineering department. And we went through a big growth spurt. We got an institutional investment round. We went from, I don't know, maybe 11 to just shy of 30 or something like that developers, and that's fast, that's furious. There's a lot of moving parts, and we were able to put a lot of practice in place that kept that team very, very high performing and culturally sound. Um, where people use themselves, the team, the customer, the company as like a mirror the whole way through, because you kind of saw the reflection of the work you were doing so that it was very easy for you to say, hey, I'm not in line with our value system. I mean, to the tune that we erected a mantra and put it up on our wall, kind of like when we were teams going out from the locker room and you kind of slap we had that. And that spilled into all of our practices and to the day, to this day, one of the greatest things we did, kind of going back to that, where you build up this tech debt and you build on rocky ground. We built a system where twice a year we took an entire sprint, or actually entire two sprints, so twice a year, 1 month. We only worked on technical debt. And
Okay.
we built this into the culture of the company, like in these 2 points in the year, unless it's a hot fix, unless something hits the fan, we're gonna focus on making things better. We're
Right.
gonna focus on making things better so that we can increase the efficiency and the velocity of adding new technology value to our customers.
Right.
Everybody, a little bit of a growing pains in the beginning, but everybody was thankful, and the engineers were thankful for that.
Right. Because nobody wants to build on the crap that the spaghetti
Well,
code
and
that
a
got
lot of
them.
it's labor of love. I mean,
Yeah.
we're craftspeople. We see things, and some of us are OCD, and if the knife's a little bit off on the table, it kind of bothers you, and when it bothers you after a while, you can't always write good code because you're constantly always like, oh, there's dragons.
Yeah. 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 Okay. And so have you going into that, you've got culture and transitioning. Have you ever outsourced during those periods and what were your good experiences? I'm sure there's lots of bad ones.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about some of that and what when and why you would have ever outsourced?
So I have, for good or bad, been outsourcing my entire career. I've
Okay.
run teams
Wow.
all over the world. I've had teams in India, Pakistan. I've run, a full team out of a company that we even set up in Uzbekistan for years.
Okay.
There is a lot of garbage in, garbage out.
Yeah.
There are cultures that are very literal. So
Mm.
if you give requirement docs that have misspellings or bad, anti-patterns or some bad acceptance criteria, it's going to come back. Um, you can't just fire and forget,
Right.
because a lot of times we're going to have some clock issues, right? Around the clock issues. And what could be fixed if somebody on-prem in an hour might take 72 hours because of the telephone game. What I've learned is this, that if you outsource to a company that has their own practice that does not match your practice, you will get
Bad
that's
outcomes.
bad stuff coming out of that.
Yeah.
You have to be demonstrative in why you do your things, and you've got to hold anybody, whether it's an outsourced firm or it's an individual contractor. And it could even be somebody that's not on, where the other side of the sun. It could be in Latin America. I work a lot with Latin American teams now. I've been for the
Mhm.
last 6 years. I find that software engineers and software engineering teams and development teams are open to leadership.
Right.
And if you aren't clear on your leadership style and the practice that makes your company successful, then it is open for interpretation and you'll get burned. And it'll eventually, wear you down, and then you'll be in the camps like, I hate outsourcing, I only want to go on-prem, and then your burn rates through the roof, right? And so
Right.
it becomes an economic, cultural juggling that can be solved by good leadership.
Right. Right. Yeah. Hard to find. I mean, you can make generalizations about different cultures around the world and how they operate. Like you said, some are highly literal and some are very holistic. And you can
Yeah,
go east to west kind of thing in
yeah.
that interpretation, or even north south a bit. But but even within those jurisdictions, there's, every company has its own culture, so it's hard to get properly matched. How have you been? What has been your most successful motion or process in finding those firms?
So
Did you have or were you in a big enough firm they had like a whole research department and that went to
I
them?
think it really comes down to expectation
Hmm.
and being able to the power of no.
Right,
Um, I feel like I've worked with companies where we had a window to market. And it's just grab the closest. Oh wait, you got 7 developers on the bench. We'll take them.
right.
Let's go, go, go,
You got
go.
a show, you got a finished product for a show.
We
Wait
got a
for it.
deadline, we got to hit, and we're
Right,
just, and I think that's a bad practice. And
right,
um, being able to build a relationship. I work with several firms in Mexico now where they understand exactly what we're looking for. In fact, the triage that they do and on or not triage, but on let's say the scrutiny that they put in on candidates that are coming through their door happens before they even get to me now.
right.
Now, sometimes that takes time, but I think that people are sometimes afraid to tell you exactly what they want.
What do you mean?
Like,
You mean the vendor or
if you tell the vendor exactly, or sometimes you'll want too much, right? You're
okay,
telling them too much what you want, or you're not telling them enough of of what you want. But it's never, I don't find it's exact. Um, and I also find that, we'll say we want this, this, and this. We won't say this and this. They'll get in. We'll hold them accountable for what we didn't say we wanted, and we let them slide on what we did want.
gotcha.
And it takes 3 and 4 to tango here. So
Right,
in one hand, you've got every software engineer, software developer, design engineer, QA engineer, whatever you have, DevOps, like you can't fake your experience. Like
right.
you'll get sniffed out immediately.
Of course.
Right? And everybody's doing this because they love doing it. We want to solve complex problems. So
Right,
that's an ingredient that is static. It's always there. You never have to worry about it. If you can just add the ingredient as a searching for a vendor, as a company to say, this is how we work, this is how we gauge success, and this is what we're holding you responsible, and this is what you're going to learn from us, and this is how we are going to help you get to the next, level of your career. Having that conversation up front, I feel is half the battle. And so if you can
right.
slow down and truly partner and ally with your vendor,
Yeah,
or whoever they are, well, now you have a relationship. It's not just a transactional thing that you're like, well, if they don't
right,
work out, we can go to these guys. No,
right.
how much money do you spend as an engineering organization every day on your burn rate? A lot of engineering organizations don't know that number. Like truly break that down. All your development, all your licensing costs, all everything. How much per day do you spend? Well, every day that you are pivoting, you are in limbo, that you don't have the right people, that's burn. That's
Right.
burn and that's drag. And
Right.
so it behooves you to build these relationships best and ironclad up front,
Right.
because it's very much, it's easier to course correct than to replace.
Yeah, I would definitely say that for hiring in a in an outsourcing environment, if you should know within a couple sprints whether it's these people are working out.
Two sprints.
Yeah, two sprints exactly. And sometimes when we're trying to match companies, we really do look for that cultural fit. Like we emphasize how this organization works, what is success to them in a sprint, what is success to them from an individual perspective, and we really like companies that come back to us with, hey, you can tell a transactional company by their churn rate, first of all,
Yep.
and also by how they hire and what they look for. And we really like the odd time we get the company that says, we built a company that we would want to work for ourselves. Like that's how we filter. And then you get really good rounded engineers.
Yep.
And then that produces into the outcome. But you can see people who are just going to go for the money, and you can see the buyer on the client side saying, I'm really just looking to cut costs, give me transaction, give me the rates. And we fire those as clients. We say, look, we're not solving for that. We're solving for a partner relationship, and we're
Yep.
going to broker that to you. So that's kind of how we've seen failures in where it's really transactional, really badly that. So let's go back to I want to go back to your personal experience and what were the biggest challenges for you as a person
Sure.
in certain environments and how you overcame them. So a shitty boss or a hard culture that just doesn't work out for you, and how you as a person got through that, and what you would have loved to have that you might not have had at that time that you would recommend now.
That's a great question. I'm a very passionate, very talk with my hands, very
Me
emotional
too.
type.
So,
And,
yeah.
and I live my life like that, and I live business like that. I've never been one to just, Eric, go over there and do that and don't ask any questions. I can't, I don't roll like that. Um, I used to joke that like around 5 years, my brand of crazy wore out with companies. I've always had about five, 5-ish years, 5 to 7 years, and I'll either go on to something new or, the company would pivot. Um, I, I've had a couple opportunities in life to work for, leaders that I would not work for again.
Okay.
And I've had many opportunities to work with leaders and people where I still talk to them, on the reg to ask them for advice. The ones that I didn't and I had to walk away from, I look at it this way. If you're the person that has to lie to get things done, if you're the person that has to obfuscate to hide the things that have been done, if you're the person that doesn't want to empower the nucleated team to kind of help make decisions because they may see a bigger picture, that will eventually just be a fuse to a large stick of dynamite, relationship wise, or, personality wise. And it's very hard for me to sit by and watch that happen in companies. So personally, um, that's a difficult thing to acknowledge, especially, we live, it's an expensive life we live, right? It's expensive to live. It
Yeah.
costs a lot to have our kids and eat and go and have our houses. I live in San Diego. I mean, it's ridiculous here.
Yeah.
And, you know, a lot of people are just kind of, if this shoe drops, like what happens, right? So you get to a point where like, I don't want to say anything because what it means is that I might be out of a job or I might be
Right.
on the outs. And then what happens?
Right.
Right? So you live this life of fear where you're waiting for the shoe to drop, you don't know what's around the corner, and so you end up sort of accepting, and that personally can wear you down,
Sure.
right? You see people that then they start working too hard and they don't take care of themselves and they drink too much. That's my saying to myself, especially like through COVID, you start not taking care of yourself. that all wears down. And so my personal experience has gotten to a point now where I mentioned it before, the power of no.
Right.
Um, Empowering myself to identify that and say, hey, I am not going to go down that path again. And having the comfortability and being able to remove the imposter syndrome, because we all have some level of imposter syndrome, some of us worse than others, to say, dude, you've already made it. Like, what's the worst that's gonna happen? You're gonna quit, you're gonna feel great about it, and you're gonna go off and find something new. And
Right.
I went through this really right after COVID. I just was in a situation where it wasn't right for me. It didn't have the right ingredients. It took me longer than would have hoped to realize that. And then I made the conscious decision. And it happened so that I made the decision like a little bit after I bought my house in San Diego, and it was a bit of a horror show,
Yeah.
but it all worked out. And I was
Yeah.
able to get my consultation business back to where it was prior to that, because I was doing it before I went into this full-time gig.
Hmm.
I didn't skip a beat. And
Right.
it just added to my personal efficacy and that and I feel that about everybody, and I always try to teach that to everybody. No, don't second guess yourself. Like be in charge of yourself, be aware of yourself, have enough emotional intelligence for yourself to get yourself to a position and a place where you're gonna be happy about tomorrow and not be sad about yesterday.
Well, that's really great advice. Sometimes hard to follow, right? I mean,
Yep.
the
Getting
if you're
mentors
on a
for it.
rocket ship and the culture sucks, but you're making the bet that thing's gonna go. You hang in there, it's hard to give up, right?
It is.
But if you're conflicted, it's kind of like we said earlier about, the bodies are buried in the code and you don't want, and you're self-conscious of that. So it's eating away your inside. The same thing for the culture of the company. And it's eating, the leadership is terrible and it's corrosive inside as well as out. And it's going to blow at some point. But you're on this rocket and they got they love the CEO who's just awesome, who's going to raise more and more and more money. And what happens to you in that process? And how do you come out of that?
Well, as a non-technology leader and looking at this from, really the engineering ranks, how many people do you really know that actually made it through that and came out? I mean, you always hear these, myths of Silicon Valley and like, yeah, it was like, number 12 at Google, or that doesn't happen a lot, right? And it's a
Right.
misnomer. It's a myth that keeps us betrothed to potentially really caustic and toxic environments.
Hmm.
And personally, I've never been that lucky. I've had a couple opportunities in my life where there was an exit and it just did not work out. Um, because that's what happens, in a lot of companies, your ownership gets diluted. Things they want to go up and to the right, and they don't always go up and to the right. And then, I see this a lot. They make a couple of bad decisions, they missed a market window, and then they're sold and stripped for parts.
Right.
Right. And life is too short to be wanting to always win the lottery.
Right.
You have to put in into personal work to make sure that you're happy and healthy, because not that we're cows, but happy cows give happy milk. And I I'm very good. I'm an empath, and I think I'm an ENTJ or ENFJ and the Myers-Briggs, something like that. I'm very intuitive and empathetic, and I've always been very good at reading um the room on my engineering team. I can tell when people are struggling. I take a lot of care in one-on-ones, and I try to get very intimate, like from a personal perspective with my team, to like not just be like, hey, how are you doing on work, but like, how are you doing in your life and what can we do to help you?
Right.
And so I get to coach a lot of people, not necessarily out, but I have coached a few people out. Not bad,
Right.
but like, hey, this obviously isn't the right fit for you. I see you banging your head against the wall. Let me help you find something that's going to be better suited.
Right.
And I've had people come back and be like, man, thank you. because I wouldn't have done that for myself. And so,
Right.
you mentioned in the very beginning, or we mentioned mentors, and
Yeah.
Etienne de Bruin told me a long time ago, you're never too old and you're never too proud to have a mentor. And I try to surround myself with mentors. I try to be, I try to surround myself with people that I see are happy, have the battle scars to show me, how to be a better version of myself and what to watch out for, and
Right.
have the capacity to and maybe like the strength to tell me where I'm wrong,
Right.
because I'm not always right.
Right.
And sometimes we miss that, and you just need somebody to be like, dude, that's not, you gotta fix that, or that's not a good way to look at it. And then you can sit back and go, man, you're right. I had to fog, this malaise of whatever, ego, or just,
Yeah. 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 No, there's
numbness to the pain.
yeah, the engineering department gets bolted onto, hey, this is the product we need to deliver it in X, and then marketing, sales, CEOs all get the coaching
Yes,
to be growing as a person, and then you guys got to do your shit.
yep,
And that I think if you
that's that
have a
mushroom
team,
culture. Yeah,
yeah, if you have a team that is actually growing as a team individually and as a team, then that's you're going to have a great team theoretically.
yep,
So long, and good coding obviously is key to that.
yep.
Um, so going to like coaching people out, and there's a lot of shifts going on right now in the market. A lot of the companies are starting to run out of cash. There's going to be a lot of transitions where those that don't have the cash to keep going. There's a lot of concern about Copilot and a whole bunch of other assets that are making life faster and more efficient in the engineering department, so you don't need as many engineers to execute. What are you seeing, and what are you hearing from engineers? And what are you seeing and hearing from the market in terms of uh, what's going on with AI?
So it was a meme, or I don't remember where I saw it, but the best one that I've seen about AI is, am I gonna lose my job to AI? It's like, no, you're gonna lose your job to somebody that uses AI,
Yeah.
or ChatGPT, right? Am I gonna
Right,
lose my
right.
job to ChatGPT? No, you're gonna lose your job to somebody that uses ChatGPT.
Yep.
Uh, I use as much help as I can get. I'm an older guy. My chops aren't good. I still write code. I lean more towards Python these days because it's just my brain wraps around it easier. But I'm using as much help as I can, right, to work my way and make myself more efficient. Um, I don't see, at this point, or over the next 5 to 10 years, I don't see a lot of teams reduced in size greatly due to the advent of generative AI in a development sense. I see as being able to create things quicker. I see more innovators. I see more invention. I see more thinking outside the box and less time to get to that, plateau of innovation. I think there is still some sentiment about IP. We saw this, I think, with Sony and, like, putting stuff out there, but if you're working in somebody's large language model, and you might expose some stuff, how are you really going to trace that back to what somebody else is using? I don't know, and I don't know the mechanics of that. But what I do see is teams are using it. I do see a lot of buzz around Copilot, and the use of helping engineers to be more thoughtful. We do work fast and furious, as I've said, and sometimes maybe you're, not making the most elegant sense in your code. And I think that there's a lot of help there that you can get.
Hmm.
Um, why not, why not bask in the sun of new stuff if you can, right? And what we're seeing now, I think, is just scratching the surface.
Hmm.
And what we're gonna see now, maybe the people that are going to be displaced are, there's going to be a lot of no code, low code solutions out there. So I would say maybe net new companies wouldn't need as many developers as they would have 5 years ago, right? A company that's just getting off the ground, it's like, hey, I've got this great idea. Awesome. We can kind of do that with 2 people, whereas maybe before we needed 8 people.
Right.
Like, but I think people that are on teams right now, if you're doing what you need to do and you are good at what you do, as long as the company's still making money, but there is churn, right? Not maybe as much as like the bottom 10% of a sales organization, but there is churn. And if you're sitting
Mm.
on your hands and I've walked into companies, one of the first things I do, I go in forensically through the code. I want to see commits. I don't care
Yeah.
about lines of code. I want to see how much code you're committing. I want to see
Hmm.
how much value that you're adding to a code base. If I find a developer that hasn't committed since October, and I'm like, why haven't you committed since October? Well, I'm working locally. You're out.
Right.
I have no, unless there's a very specific reason why that's happening, you are not actively, putting new technology and new value into this. So it's very easy to see. When I see people that will go through their normal SDLC, and you can tell that all their code was written by ChatGPT or Copilot,
Copilot, yeah.
you're out.
Right.
Right, because what you're potentially allowing is a wolf in sheep's clothing. You're allowing a fox into the hen house. There
Right.
could be something in there that you didn't see. And so that is where I look for cracks in the foundation, right? There's
Right.
a lot of pressure, I get it, but I look for that's where the smoke is to me. Somebody that's actively using it and bolstering what they already know and bringing their expertise and maybe using it to do 60% of the heavy lift and their other
Right.
40% is what we pay them for. Awesome, because you're getting things done 60% faster.
Right. Right. Yeah, I see that very, very true. Very true. And it's funny, there was, I don't know if you listened to The Hard Fork, the New York Times
Oh,
podcast on technology. It's really funny.
it
But
is.
if you think about any LLM, or in this case, Copilot, it's using existing content to generate content. So if ultimately you get the same 10 jokes, if it's always trying to optimize for the same 10 things, right? And the same thing with content. So if you got to ultimately, we'll just ChatGPT is going to be generating content that ChatGPT has written that was
Yep.
based on content that was written now, right? So as that, there will be a transition point where there's more ChatGPT content than there is human content in original products. So I think that's the opportunity, is the growth in original product coding, whatever art, whatever it is. It's going to have to feed that engine to create something new, and that's where huge value is.
No.
Always a better way.
So, to go back to kind of the theme of this is growing pains
Mhm.
and we're finding pains either in, new ways to do things and how do we acclimate to that, or can we break away from the old things that we're doing and get to new things? One of the core competencies of the company I'm with, Scaletech, and what we bring to our customers and what we hold ourselves personally responsible in our teams is, if you have good ingredients, those ingredients individually might not make the very best thing, but if you have a good recipe and you get creative to put that recipe together, but once that recipe's together, it's not very creative, it's very rigid, right? To produce the
Okay.
same thing every time. So like when I'm building the process, I'm creative in building the process. How can I build this process? How can we get it? But once that process is solidified, it's not creative anymore. It's very rigid.
Okay.
There is
Okay.
a there is a process in there to retrospect that process to say, how did it do? And then add potentially some continuous improvement. But once that process is in place, then it's very clear how everybody's going to work in there. And even if they are using something like Copilot or a new way to do things, it's very fast where you're going to see, did this miss or make the mark?
All right.
Right? Because we have clear metrics, we have a clear delineation between people and how they communicate and how they report. So for us, when I'm looking at things, there's not a lot of area for me to guess or wonder if that's working. try to build my process to immediately see that it is or it isn't working so that I can go and address why it's not working quickly.
Okay.
Make sense?
It does, but when you have a rigid process, if it's kind of like AI, it depends on who the parents are, what's the outcome you're looking for, and then suddenly you get a new environment and you need a different outcome. The rigidity of that process doesn't always work.
Doesn't on a net new where it works, meaning once it starts to work for an organization,
Right,
we keep it not rigid that it's frozen, just rigid that I know where the boundaries are and I know how the metrics define, what's working and what's not. And
right.
being able though to continuously improve that. So to
Yeah,
take pause and stop and go, okay, great, we did this for 6 months. How did we do? And now oh, okay, we can do better over here. That's when then we say, okay, we're gonna get creative again. We're gonna
okay,
figure out how to expand this process. Oh, now everybody's using AI, ChatGPT or Copilot. Cool. How do we adopt our process to allow for that so that we don't have things that that are getting past us and getting to our customer, and then all of a sudden we have that oh crap moment, and our customer's like, why is this doesn't work anymore,
right,
right? Which is the
right.
bane of our existence. When our customer tells us what's bad, that's very hurtful. I always want to be the one to fix that before the
Anticipate
customer
it.
even sees
Yeah,
it. Anticipate it.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But actually, well, I mean, that's I mean, I've gone from zeros to 10 a couple of times. So that iterative process is the love relationship if it is that you have with customers to build what they're actually looking for
No,
and move around. So does that process you're talking about, you come in with this structure and sort of one size fits all, or is it based on various sizes of organizations?
yeah,
What level of growth they're at, the size of engineering department? How does this work?
that's it. So our process is based on CTO levels, which was devised by Etienne de Bruin, Scott Graves, and Kathy Keating. And Scott Graves and I are business partners. And when we analyze a company for the level, it's not the level of the CTO or it's the level of the company. Like how big is your engineering team and what is your annual budget for engineering? That tells us where that technology leader should be in the focus area that technology leader should be focused on. So if it's a very small company, very small team, they're startup, we know that there's building blocks that they should be focused on. Really
Hmm.
good software development lifecycle stuff, like just key ingredients that they're going to be able to build upon. If they're a company that's got a team of 30 or 40, well, they should be focused on different things. And so we come in and when we do when we analyze a company, we can very quickly diagnose either what they should be looking at, what they should have looked at, and what's potentially in deficit. And,
Right.
and, and then start to find the critical path through that. Okay, well, if we pull this lever and push this button and add this process, well, that's going to shake a few of these reds out into greens. And so, no, it's not one size fits all, but holistically, it 98% of the time, we're seeing that it fits most, right? And there
Okay.
are anomalies, but there are some table stakes in there that fit everybody. Like we
Okay.
believe there are some key things to software development that absolutely have to be in place, or else you will eventually become top heavy and the house of cards will fall over.
Okay. So you see a lot of SaaS companies,
Mhm.
and they are in various stages of growth. Are you seeing any pattern recognition in what's red in that organization in the layers?
Yep.
That's consistently these two spots and these are yellow and these are always green, or are you seeing anything that you could share with us?
We see a lot of pattern recognition.
Okay.
When I was working with 7 CTOs, they have offer a growth program where they take in SaaS organizations that may not have a technical leadership, but they are producing software. A lot of times the development, I've got a small window of opportunity here. I've got some money and maybe not a lot on bootstrap. Maybe I got friends and family investment. I need a solution quick, and that solution gets thrown together and then they get some traction and then they go. And
Right.
so I will come in and we'll be like, okay, well, just to get a little esoteric here, what's your versioning practice? Do you use feature flags? Are you using, test-driven development? Like, do you have, do you do this? Do you do this? And a lot of companies go like, no, we don't do that. And we're
No,
like,
it's monolithic and we respond to the customer and patch it in.
Exactly. We're pushing changes right to production. We have no test environment. We see this all the time. And so what I always say is like, you've got a successful company that's there in spite of themselves.
Right,
Okay? They've got hard deadlines from the top. They've got a team that doesn't even understand how, they can work with each other, let alone understand their customer and how to deploy. We see this a lot. And um, sometimes it does take the pause to just come in. And I don't mean a year pause or even 5 months pause, but sometimes we need to pause for a couple of weeks and try
right,
and try to like dive in and ask, do you have the right people? Do
right,
you have the right direction?
right.
And do you have, what you need to be successful? And what's the smallest common denominator there? What can we install right now that's definitely going to ramp you up and get you going? And a lot of times you can make very small changes that have very large results.
In the earlier stage company.
Sometimes even in late stage companies,
Okay.
right? But you
Give me
have
an
to,
example of where you made small changes and made big influence to the outcomes for a later stage. When I say later stage, they're well into Series A, close to Series B. They've got 40 engineers.
For me, late stages, the companies that I work with, usually around 30 people, they're making
Okay.
over 5 mil ARR, maybe closer to 10 mil ARR.
Okay.
They were either bootstrapped or had like an initial round and now they're making revenue and they're reinvesting,
Right.
right? So to me,
Okay.
this is a company that is running and
Path to profitability, all that shit. Yeah.
yeah. And so I have a customer that, when we came in, very successful and the future was super bright and is right now super bright. But when we looked at their engineering organization, it was just like, wow, I don't
How did you
understand.
pull it together?
How did you pull this together? And
Right.
so within a couple weeks, Scott Graves and I were able to come in and, we looked at it and within a couple days, we were like, we know right where the fire is right now. And we were thankfully and it takes buy-in from the
Senior.
CEO, And the CEO is like, look, I'm gonna step aside, do what you have to do, as long as you're not gonna alter our course of, our trajectory. And we're like, no, we're gonna be transparent. We're gonna tell you exactly what we needed to do. Monolithic team, monolithic application, no understanding of the value streams, no delineation between value streams, working on many things at once, not moving the ball forward with new technology value. And they were on the precipice of churn and attrition.
Okay.
And so we came in and we're like, boom, boom, boom. We made a couple changes. It was a little painful, had to let a couple people go. We had to bring in a couple people. And now 6 months later, 5 months, 6 months later, like 2024, Scott and I talk about H1, H2, and H3, our horizons, where we align with the product side of the business and
Okay.
the business product to clearly clearly define what is the horizon one? What do we have to do right now? What do we have to do next to start to build these defensible competitive moats that are going to allow you to pull away from your competition so there's less of a chance they're going to eat your lunch? And then what's your H3? What is going to just solidify you in the annals of history as the best that you can be, right? That's a big audacious goal. But the H1s and H2, we come in and what we do is we put the process and the team together so that they understand that, which a lot of the engineering teams, they don't know where you're going. I just know I'm
Right.
building this because you told
Right.
me to.
Right. 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 Yeah,
Once
they're
you
just
have that
tickets and pulls. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, once you have that synergy and once you have that transparency and communication, well, now you are a unit and everybody's moving. You are this kind of complex adaptive system, right? That has laws guiding each of the dynamic parts, but all those dynamic parts, they're all working in conjunction. It's like the human body. We're made up of atoms, which are made up of quarks, but nobody's questioning the quarks of the atoms. We just look at the human body and we're like, it all works and that's great. We kind
Right.
of think about engineering that same way. And yeah, so that was a big success. Long-winded, but a big
What was the
success.
company in quantum physics? Just out of
No,
curiosity.
no, they're a SaaS company and they're in, the reputation management space.
Okay.
And it's a joy working with them for them and seeing the team for multiple times, like, this is great. Thank you. We didn't even see this.
Right.
Right. And now we see it and we see how it's relatable to everything else. So in the levels, when you look at the levels, when you're all the way up here, then you can start to see how the critical path
Reverse
traces.
engineering it. Yeah.
Yeah, you reverse engineer it.
Right. That's interesting. I literally, that's what I'm going through with one of our clients is, we know we rebuilt their entire product actually, or had a client, had one of our vendors rebuild their product. And, and because they were firefighting all the way through the existence, they're saying, well, we don't need anyone else. We're going to just take it over, and they're just going to repeat to, responding to emergencies. And we're suggesting, hey, you need to bring in somebody who's going to have a vision for your next level, and bring the engineering team in with that person, so that, oh, well, we know what we got to build the next 6 months. No, you need to know what you're building in the next 18 months, and then reverse engineer back towards that, and get the whole engineering buying into that. They have no clue what's going on.
It's
And
painful. It can be very painful.
very painful. That transition, as well
Well,
as,
they're spending
uh,
sometimes a lot of money for you to tell them the things they don't want to hear.
yeah, yeah, that can be the case. And sometimes they don't want to hear it, and they just, go on their merry way. That's fine.
It's fine.
But I'm glad to hear it. So have you actually measured outcome differences based on that experience with them?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Our outcome, so for our outcome, we look at really three things. We look at new revenue that's coming in because of new technology value that was delivered.
Hmm.
Look at the velocity of that new technology delivered, and the allocation of new technology value versus like keeping the lights on work that the
Right,
development team is doing. The more new
right.
technology value, the less KTLO,
Maintenance
the more
versus
success.
build. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Right.
And then we're looking also at just the health of the engineering organization. Do I have to be in every single sprint planning, every group sprint
Right.
grooming? Do I have
Right.
to be at every, hopefully not. My job is to work myself out of a job, or at least down to less, because now the team can anticipate and they understand, and so those are really our big three metrics. Um, it's very quick to say, are we successful? Do we need to do more? Or is this not a successful environment for us? Is this never going to work for us because they just
There's too
don't
much
want it?
resistance to
Too
change,
much
right?
resistance? And that's it's I would say some of what we do is unorthodox, just because it just doesn't follow the standard way of building software. And
Yeah.
when it works, and when it doesn't, it's like, okay, cool.
Very cool.
Good
Well,
luck.
I'm glad for you and glad for that outcome. Thank
Yeah,
you for all the insights you offered us today.
my pleasure.
And is there anything else you want to share? How does anyone get in touch with you, Eric?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, Erik Birkfeld, Birkfeld. My company is Scaletech Consulting. Yeah, that's it, Scaletech Consulting. And please, if you are listening to this and you are a CTO, you are a technology leader, take a look at 7 CTOs. It is paramount to the success of your personal self and your professional self to be surrounded by like-minded individuals and learn from how other people are doing it. And I could not emphasize that value, whether it's their growth program or their forum or their community program. Just having those people around you makes us all better.
Yeah,
And be good to
great advice.
yourselves.
Great
Smile
advice.
often.
All right, Eric, thank you so much. And
Oh, thank you.
we'll be in touch soon.
Appreciate you.